Good morning. Let's wander today, because when I looked at the experience of what's coming up next week as far as the planetary conversations with each other, there wasn't a lot. There's always some, but today's Saturday, the 25th, and something that I only skirted over because there were so many other things going on last week is that on today, the Sun in Taurus comes into a perfect square aspect with Pluto up in Aquarius. So, who are these characters? How do they fit into our world dance that we're all a part of? The Sun. The Sun, it's the center of this particular universe, and because of that, it takes on, the energy of leadership, regality. Think of the king or the queen or someone in a position of authority. And those all speak to the solar aspect of a situation, an experience, a person, an event. It's in play, and the Sun is kind of like, when we think of astrology, this is the aspect that most people tune into, is what is that Sun doing? What is the vitality of this particular moment? Well, the Sun is in Taurus. Taurus is a sign that, how is your druid doing? There's a term that goes quite well with Taurus. Also, are you tuned in effectively enough to your appetites? Taurus, it has appetites. And I'm going to wander a little further afield. We don't need to look at the chart right at the moment, but I'm going to ask you, do you know where the elements came from? Fire, earth, air, water. They are energetic combinations that came out of the pre or earliest versions of our understanding of certain energetics that life is about. And these are referred to as the temperaments. The temperaments. And there are 4 temperaments: sanguine, choleric, melancholic, and phlegmatic. And it's kind of like, as far as those terms go, they're probably not going to resonate that well with you because these aren't in the vocabulary of everyday conversations that we have with one another. But today I want to throw them out for you. Sanguine. Sanguine is affiliated with the air element. It's a combination of 2 factors. Remember, we had hot, cold, dry, and moist. Sanguine, or the air, comes from a combination of moist and hot. Picture that. Steam. Can you see the potential for steam there? Here are some terms that go along with this sanguine archetype to consider. Natural mediators. Now, think about this is air signs we're talking about. Generous, friendly and easygoing. Seekers, seeking connection and experiences. Many acquaintances, few deep friends. Relationships may seem transactional. Great listeners, gossipy busybodies, strong optimism. Forgiving, flighty, unreliable, strong sense of justice, weak in offering solutions. Pluto currently is in an air sign, Aquarius. We will get to that. Let's go to our Earth. Earth is the melancholic thing. It's a combination of, from our four elements, hot, dry, cold, moist. Dry and cold. That's Earth. Here are some terms to think about as far as the Earth element goes. And we're made up of aspects of all these different temperaments. You know, they give a flavor to this energetic dance that we're always about. And we're in an Earth sign right now, Taurus. Lower self-esteem. These are the terms for it. Less motivated. If you think about the energetic fire energy of Aries that we just went through, and now we're into Taurus, and Taurus says, hey, it's time to chill. You know, all this high energetic, which, you know, by the way, we still have a lot of planets in Aries, so the Aries element hasn't stepped off of the, you know, the turntable of life to such an extent that we can just ignore it. Oh no, it's a part of all of us all the time. Realistic outlet. Pessimistic, stoic, not likely to speak up. Bottles up emotions. Logic-oriented, struggles with relating, lacks emotional intelligence, self-isolating, strongly organizational. If you can kind of feel that Virgo and Earth quality right there. Focused and determined. Cold and dry, the temperament. I should probably read you up some of the things about cold. Cold decreases energy. It freezes. Stillness. Quietness. Deceleration. Makes static. Rest. These are some cold terms to contemplate. Conservation. Relaxation, soothing, healing, dispassionate inward illumination, reflection, endarkenment, clarification, concentration, focus, state of meditation, transcendence, imagination, dreams, intuition. Everything is possible. Potential. And the dry of the earth. We'll go back to our our sanguine shortly. Dry. Now dry hardens, it separates. Think of parched, think of tension, discrimination, analysis, categorization, breaking things down, making distinctions, solitude, estrangement, politics, warfare, conflict, defining limits, making boundaries, structure, organization, wisdom, transformation. That's the dry and cold of the melancholic earth nature. Some things to contemplate. Let's go back to our sanguine here for just a second. sanguine, that moist, making connections, and hot, energizing things. So hot, motion accelerates, generates, energizing, exciting, warming, brightened, impassioned, inspiring, uplifting, enthusiastic, actualized, enlightened, illuminated, awakened. That's the hot side of the air sign. Now the moist side, wet, softens, loosens, moisturizes, blending and synthesis, promises vision, makes connections, bonding, inclusiveness, socialization, togetherness, community, creative process, invention, innovation, inspires genius, stepping beyond, moving through. Can you feel the potential for that air part inside you wanting to take that moist, hot energy and engage in the life experience in ways that can bring things together in some fashion? Not necessarily predetermined, but the option is there to, bring things together and heat it up. Can you feel the energy in that? So, as I started out, we right now have the sun, that ball of fire in Taurus, in that earth nature that is, dry and cold. There's a structure and a form always wanting to be, leaned into. And then we have Pluto up there in an air sign wanting to moisten and make connections in a heated fashion, in a Plutonic fashion. Now, who is Pluto in this dance? The Lord of the underworld, the purveyor of death, the potential for tuning into secrets. These are all Plutonic considerations. And you have to ask yourself, in this square aspect between, Pluto and the Sun, which basically I would give it a couple days on either side of today when the exact aspect takes place, to really tune into this and ask yourself, are there perspectives of leadership that, currently are in need of some level of, I was going to say expatriation, allowing a dynamic change that has no less significance than aspects of dying away so that something new can be available as an aspect of change that we should pay attention to in what it is that we recognize as the leadership that exists within each and every one of us. It's there, and we play it in our caloric, sanguine, melancholic, or phlegmatic fashion, the temperaments. Engaged in whatever sign you happen to be focusing on. And part of the art of the astrological dance is to keep in mind a perspective or a container within which there are a lot of dynamic energies in play all the time. One of the reasons that I chose this image behind me, which, in a way doesn't do justice to what it is that I wanted to say. But this is a portion of an art piece that is, you can't see it because this is a static image. But in its creation, the addition of acrylic paint colors and some oil chemical base added to it causes the morphing, shifting, blending, changing of the image that you see behind me that doesn't stay static until it's dry. But I wanted to use this as a repetition because you can look at any part of this thing, this blue character here. Let's say that this is an example. The whole picture is an example of society. And these are all, each of these little images is a person's energy. And as with life, there's a ongoing dance where these things, they don't stay still. There's a shifting, there's an energy, there's a blending within the context of engaging with one another that shapes, modifies, and morphs the experience that each of us has as a being in the recognition of who we are as a reflection of those interactions that we have with one another all the time. Nothing stays static, or if it does, I think that's a definition of what is dead. Even in that, the rejoining of the earthian elements back into the earth, being reclaimed after being borrowed for a particular soul journey that we, or each of us, has been on for this version of life dance, life walk, life experience, in the attempts to facilitate a version of soul awareness that happens only at the incarnating level, because when you get to the larger consideration of the context of the package of life, spirit, which doesn't necessarily tell you what you need to do, but is always present as, a kind of like an energetic reminder to soul that it has a mission. Each of us, when we arrived in the current incarnation, in any incarnation, we bring with us a gift from spirit that our soul development carries with it all the time. Now, the question might be, how does one tune into this gift, this soul gift that each of us has, most effectively, so that through our living, expression, and experience, we can allow this gift to not only be offered, but to grow in soul significance within each of us, because it doesn't stay the same. The soul experience on earth is a growing process, and we start out with a certain soul awareness at birth, and as we go through life and we do the interaction with all these different characters here that we engage with, we change. Our soul perspective changes, and spirit always kind of sitting, overseeing the whole thing. When we make an error, and do something that isn't in the best interest, the spirit goes, back to the drawing board. And, when we do something that actually engages with that soul dance expansion process, something new puts in an appearance, and spirit is going, yeah, keep going. There's a vitality in that soul spirit dance that I think is worth tuning into. This week, I had the fortunate opportunity, which I get together with a group of friends that I attended 5th and 6th grade with in Cairo, Egypt. And several years ago, we began to gather once a month to consider things, because each of us from whatever countries, it's a variety of different international perspectives that comes together to consider things. And on this particular week, one of the members gave us his autobiography, talking through the experience of what it was that happened in life. And, we're all the same age, all of us. And so going through each of the steps that he was laying out, I was able to tune into aspects of my own life dance that I was going through at the same time from my perspective, with his oversight from his perspective. And then, to add some more energetics to this, one of the other friends from France chimed in and offered his 241-page PDF version of his autobiography, which is it's a book. And, his ability to utilize language, it took me a couple days to read that, but because he was a lot closer friend than this other one that we were listening to in our monthly meeting, just the capacities of, reliving not only just that 5th and 6th grade experience that we were going through, but the whole life spectrum from birth to the current moment where we're all around 76, 77, 78 years old. And to engage with that soul dance and its unfolding process as each of us awakened to what it is that we needed to do in this experience of the life dance. I tell you, there were many moments in reading the book version that I went, oh God, I should write these things, because, the memories of things that were coming up as his story was unfolding, was my story unfolding. And through his story, he ended up being a counselor coach for businesses and all kinds of things with that, soul invented perspective of being an invitation for others to, tune into as effectively as they could the larger container within which we found ourselves as being extremely vital to what it is that we as a soul being had to offer into any experience that would, allow it to flourish and grow and be an ingredient in the unfolding of the life dance for everybody. And that is, one of the gifts that we as soul beings bring for each other to consider as we willingly open and create that communication level that is there all the time for us to engage with each other. Anyway, a lot of energy percolating this week, and it's springtime here in our Northwest. We're finally getting some sunny weather. I'm actually contemplating going and transplanting corn from our greenhouse, where I have it started, out into the garden, which I spent 3 hours out yesterday weeding and getting ready to put the corn in the ground. Life never, ever is dull. There's always so much to do. We're not going to go into the temperaments of fire and water, or caloric and phlegmatic right now, but rest assured they are equally as entertaining to meditate upon. Let's find a chart. Okay, this is today. There's our big square between the Sun and Pluto. And this is a potent energy. The Sun and Pluto engage with each other every year because Pluto moves really, really slow. And looking at multiple charts here. Yeah. And so the Sun moves a degree a day. Pluto moves, 3, maybe 4 degrees a year. And it goes forward and backwards. The Sun, not so much. No forward, backwards things. After all, it is the core of our solar system. So it's plodding along, and everything is essentially circling around and following this solar pull. Can you feel the potential of that energetic king-type leadership, queen-type leadership that the Sun represents for all the other planetary energies to focus in on and make the determination as to what is it that we need to do in order to facilitate the dictates from that level of leadership that is pointing us in a direction. That opens up a can of worms these days on the planet, because there are definitely leaders in positions of control that don't seem to have the soul or spirit version of what it is that we came to accomplish here on Earth most effectively. I don't want to get into the politics of that, because that's a rabbit hole, or a wormhole that you could climb down into, and some do, and never resurface again. I think some of them are in positions in the political world right now. I don't want to go into politics. Put that aside. Let's wander through the week. What else have we got happening today? That's right. When I was looking at all the factors that are in play, the one that I'm going to focus in on here is Uranus. 29 degrees, 58 minutes of Taurus, which means that when Sunday comes along, Uranus steps across the line, puts on a different hat, and no longer is working at the experience in true Uranian fashion to shake, rattle, and roll the process of that earth sign, Taurus. How, we set up how our diet is going to unfold in, with some level of trust that, excuse me, will sustain our body, that houses our soul. And sometimes I wonder if it's not the other way around, if the soul doesn't house the body. There is definitely a connection there. I'll let that sit for the moment. Anyway, Uranus going into Gemini it's an invitation to ask ourselves, is my communication and thinking processes, truly Gemini, doing an effective enough job that I will be able to discover some level of stability, which is not necessarily going to be readily and easily presented, because Uranus doesn't, it doesn't work along those lines. Uranus is a Promethean thing. It is the great awakener. It rattles things, it shakes things, it disturbs things. You can kind of sense revolution and earthquake kind of energies. Moving into this field of Gemini for the next 7 years is going to challenge us to, are our thoughts appropriate? Is what it is I am communicating with you, with me, communication is a two-way street, going to be a moniker of growth, where each of us is going to be a better experience of ourselves and the world that we share together coming out of this? Or are we going to shake, rattle, and roll our cages apart and get into that, political conflict that seems to be so rampant these days, only ironically happening at a very small fraction of the population, not spelling out a version of cohesion potential between us, but saying, no, you can't trust them because they're different, without the recognition of that we need differences. Differences are required. That's the reason that we're here, is to compare notes with one another so that we can allow for a blending of our soul level awareness that is, the spirits are excited by that interchange that we have with each other to grow that soul level of awareness. We're going to go through 7 years of, paying attention, hopefully, not to the potential for revolution, but the potential to wake up, the Promethean side of that Uranus, to a version of interactive communication with one another that will spawn, spin, rotate in a circular motion, advancing, increasing, and climbing levels of awareness into higher consciousness. That's what we potentially can be working toward. There is always, of course, a descending spiral taking place of those that, aren't willing to perceive that interactive capacity, which is why we really came on Earth, that the spirits are, shaking their heads and going, oh my God, they've done it again. They're spiraling in a downward, destructive version of reality that doesn't really enhance the soul capacity of why it is that we are here on Earth at this moment. But as with anything, free will is the final determinator of what it is that each of us has to go through. We have the choice. We always do. So you make your choices. I'll make mine. And with any luck, the conversations that happen between us are going to be that uplifting invitation into that ascending spiral of soul spirit level enhancement. Yeah. Off your horse, Jeff. It's, when I looked at this week, we shift from basically April to May. We're ending up April and we're going into May. And as we do this, there are a number of different factors that transpire. Here on Tuesday, we've got all the way to Tuesday, Venus moved into a trine with Pluto. Venus, the ruler of Taurus, where the sun is right now. So if we take into consideration the potential challenges that square that transpired between the sun and Pluto was asking us to modulate effectively, leadership and a version of control that seeks a level of change that has, that collective Aquarian community kind of involvement. And Venus, the ruler of Taurus, now forming that trine with Pluto, is, from Gemini, is querying us as to, is, from a Taurian perspective, a functional foundational level, are there words coming from that can be an inspiration to a culminating cycle, which Pluto often represents a culminating part of a cycle, to awaken us to what is new and not just a repetition of what has been. Have to also be aware that nothing exists in a vacuum in astrology or in life itself. Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, which is where this Venus is still up there doing its Aries dance. The potential for energized communication to spit out, because Mercury's, it's coming out of its connection that it just recently had with Mars, words, thoughts, and vocabulary that is energized. Telling Venus in Gemini that the interactive capacity that we have with one another, shouldn't be of such nature that it's going to put one to sleep as we engage in this conversation with one another, because there are factors that require consideration right now that we haven't had before. I'm having to look at my notes. On May 1st, Friday. On this day, we have a full moon, and it happens at 11 degrees of Scorpio. What does the Sabian symbol for 11 degrees of Scorpio have to say? The utilization of the Sabian symbols is not necessarily that distantly removed from the use of cards, the tarot, or numbers, numerology, or astrology. Imagine that. As a divination process to consider what in the version, the Sabian symbols that I use are the ones that were created by Mark Edmund Jones back in 1915, 12, somewhere in that realm, and Elsie Wheeler, who was a psychic, and they went to Balboa Park down in San Diego, California, and with 360 blank cards with a little scratch note up in one corner, which neither one of them was paying attention to. They shuffled them up, and Mark would draw a card, or Elsie would draw a card, and she would get a vision. And Mark would write down the vision that she had. This is what the Sabian symbols are. He put them together in order afterwards, and he was friends with Dane Rudhyar, one of the fathers of modern psychological astrology. And Dane Rudhyar went to him one day afterwards, after looking at what Mark and Elsie had put together, and said, "Hey, Mark, can I play with these? I really sense that there's something there that can be utilized in an effective way as a divination tool." And so Dane Rudhyar wrote a book called An Astrological Mandala, in which each of the degrees of the zodiac, with its vision that Elsie Wheeler had, and then goes on to give a consideration of that particular image in order. And when I look at, right now what we're looking at is, what were we looking at? Full moon. The moon, that reflective light of the sun up there, full moon in Scorpio, the land of deep mysteries, secrets, and interconnection that we have with one another that isn't necessarily the kind of space that is open and ready to be shared with everybody, which is really unfortunate, because the potential for what can awaken in that arena is a direct awakening experience into the mysteries of life, which our soul is in and can be inspired by. Anyway, the symbol for this particular full moon, you have to ask yourself, at the last new moon, which was right near the end of Pisces, what intention did you set? Because any full moon is a maximum reflected light back on that intention that you set right there at the end of Pisces, to ask you, have I been successful in what it is that I set in motion at that new moon? And right now, if that is the case, this maximum lunar reflected light from the sun gives the opportunity to expand what it is that was set in motion in a creative enough fashion that you have something to offer to others as a teaching platform of what it is that you gleaned through that first half of the lunar cycle based on your intention. The Sabian symbol for this full moon reads, an official embassy ball. Now, my father was with the American Embassy, so this has a little bit more significance for me perhaps than you, but the keynote, group consciousness, as it flowers at the highest level in cultural interchanges between representatives of the elite of the ruling class. Now, as a child, I have memories, many memories of the parties, social gatherings that happened week after week after week at our house and other parents' houses in this elite class or embassy business representatives in these foreign countries that we were a part of, where the adults would get together and, basically become comfortable with one another and, throw in conversations related to the particular businesses that they were all about. A further reading. At present, the largest unit of social organization is the nation. The symbol pictures the ruling class of such national wholes, displaying at least the superficial forms of a concern for establishing permanent relationships in peaceful cooperation. I got to throw a political thing in here just because, these friends of mine and their parents and stuff, part of the embassy, multi-international businesses, one of which was USIA, to basically assist people in other countries around the planet with what needed to be done in order for their cultures to thrive. And the current administration that we have immediately cut the connections of USIA to the rest of the world. Said, no, we're not going to fund that anymore. And as soon as that happened, I went, oh my goodness, these people have no idea what these other cultures are like. And my first impression was there will be a lot of death as a result of this curtailment of health benefits that we as an advanced nation are providing to these other countries who do not have the benefits of, it's tongue-in-cheek for benefits, of the economics structure that we in the West have. What is evoked is the value of meeting other people at the highest possible level of cultural interplay, i.e., in full dress, rather than with an everyday type of consciousness and behavior. Am I awake enough in this full moon moment of Friday this week to be an invitation for that level of exchange that was initiated in the deep oceanic level of awareness of Pisces to format a contextual container within which we can share the benefits of planetary existence more equilaterally with one another, so that as I engage with anyone from any culture, we're going to discover that there is a commonality of our incarnation and soul curiosity that we came to consider with one another in a way that can be an awakening to all those on each of our wavelengths. On this same day, we have a sextile aspect between Venus and Saturn. Actually, I'm not going to really talk about that. It's, I probably already talked way too long. One thing that I can see that's going to happen is as Saturday becomes Sunday, Mercury shifts from Aries into Taurus. Perhaps the rhetoric, the revolutionary rhetoric of that Uranus into Gemini, which Mercury is the ruler of, has the potential, with Mercury shifting into Taurus, to lower the temperature of the rhetoric of war and disruption that has been so rampant from our Western current administration globally. And we might tune into the natural appeal that being in tune with Mother Earth, Taurus, might give us a moment of pause where the communication from Mother Earth can be heard by us. Because for the most part, our Western culture does not seem to be listening to the messages from this planet, of which each of us has borrowed the elements of our physical structure as the sole container to allow us to move around on her, with her, and ask her questions. Is this appropriate for what it is that we came to offer as a part of you, Mother Earth, at this time? Yeah, I know, I've probably talked way too much today, but the energies, the dynamism of the questions that are mulling around in my heart have to come out as an invitation to each of us to ask one another, what is it that our participation together can instill, inspire, and engage with that is more in tune with the soul, spirit, and experience of being on Mother Earth that we're all dancing with right now? And that, my friends, is all I have to say for today. Be on your toes this week. There are things afoot that each of us has a perspective on that one another may not be entirely aware of. Thanks.